Hello and welcome to episode 6 of Seddon and Lacey's Comic Stash, part of the Renaissance Men plethora, conglomerate,
Mass
universe.
media with a new Disney. We are actually animated characters. This isn't what we look like. This is
No.
some fella in a room's drawn this. It's amazing.
It's fantastic.
Actually, I don't think they do that anymore, do they? I think
That's
I'm
probably all
going too
computers.
old school. Yeah. It's all done by computers now. I don't think anyone ever picks up a pen anymore.
So as always, this is YouTube. So like, subscribe, ring the fucking bell, follow everything. Be notified and reminded when new shows come out.
And they will come out. They'll come out regularly, won't they? Now that we are the media, the new Disney.
So obviously, if you like pops, there's pop videos with the boy Seddon doing his unboxing, gaming stuff with Stu, and stuff with Stadia, and the granddaddy, the showcase of the immortals, the mega wonderful Friday night super show, which when I turn up on it goes long.
It is a super show when you turn up as well. It's like when The Rock comes back for an appearance and the crowd go wild. I like the idea of that, by the way. I like the idea of that being considered our WrestleMania. And let's not tell Vince McMahon though that he could rinse it out and do a WrestleMania every week because I don't think as much as we say our shows can go long, Jesus Christ, WrestleManias can go long. I don't think everyone's ready for an 8-hour wrestling show every week, are they?
No, I didn't even do it in one hit this year.
Oh, it is. Well, and again, I like, God, we're tangenting already, but we will get back to what the show is. But yes, WrestleMania split into 2 nights. Is a more palatable affair, but there's a part of me that says, just make a shorter, snappier show. Don't need to be 8 hours. Yeah.
So this week's episode is digital versus physical. But unlike most versus things, this isn't a battle of which is best or who is right. This is a pros and cons of both medias.
Yeah, I mean, it's not. We've not kind of gone into this picking a side. I think the idea of this is to talk to people who are watching this, and again, potentially people who are watching this are very well versed in the comic world and they've already made their decision. But basically, I guess how we experience it, as you say, the pros and cons of digital versus physical media in the comic book world, and go maybe giving our views and maybe a little sort of kind of dip into where we see the comic book industry going.
So we will start with how it began physical. So there is always going to be something to say about going in and physically thumbing through boxes and boxes of comics in a shop.
The beautiful long boxes, and I will splicey in a picture of long boxes because who doesn't want to see sexy long boxes full of comic books?
This is where I think you will always find new stuff this way, because obviously I don't use comics or whatever the digital
Comixology is one of the primary ones, but I guess we'll pick up on some of the other services around
that. So I don't know how they lay that out, but I'm going to imagine if it's like most sort of digital things, you put in a keyword, you're only going to get stuff related to that keyword. So i.e. you put in Batman, you are just going to see Batman stuff.
Yeah.
Whereas obviously if you are in a shop and there is 15, 20 long boxes there, you are more likely to just scan through and find something that the cover just piques your interest.
Yeah, similar to, I guess, a bookshop. You know, like when you go into, let's say Waterstones, not sponsored by them, but, you know, let's say Waterstones or a local one if you do. Sometimes you're going in there to buy something by a specific author, but sometimes you just see a cover on a shelf and it draws you in. And yeah, I think you're right. I think that the physical media, the comic book shop, shall we say, has that to it, doesn't it? Of going, yeah. I went there to buy A, and I come back with everything from B to Z that I never expected I was going to buy, but it just drew my attention when I walked into the store.
And it's the same for me, as you said there, with sort of books, but same for me with music.
Yeah,
Because being the metalhead, most of the stuff that I listen to isn't going to be the stuff that HMV and back in the day Virgin
yeah,
would have on their big displays of, oh, look at the new releases. Where you'd go into, because in Norwich we had a few little independent record shops, and there was one that was predominantly sort of metal and hardcore and punk and stuff. And they would put the display up of the new releases on the wall, and you would see some of these album covers that are just grotesquely gory and like, I'm intrigued by that one. I'm going to
well,
buy that.
I think we said it on one of the other ones as well, but there is something in certainly in my brain, and I think in a lot of people's, is just being attracted to the new. So
Yeah,
using that analogy, you go in there, and even if it's not necessarily, or the cover art might draw you in, which is a big thing for for comic books, and works probably both in digital and physical, but some of it's new. When you see something, you go, I've never heard of them before. And obviously in the music world it might be a band, but in the comic book world it might be a character you've never heard of before, or the writer or the artist, and it can pique your interest, can't it? And yes,
yeah,
you're probably right, it would be very hard to maybe discover that if you weren't seeing it, or if it weren't thrust in front of you. So yeah, I guess that can be a limitation to the digital form, is how they're presented to you, and whether you're ever going to find those things.
yeah. And it's the thing is, like as you said, you can go in and go, right, I want a Batman, and you can sit there and you can thumb through the box of Batman, and then you see there's like a crossover one where it's say Batman
Yep.
versus the Flash or something like that,
Yeah.
and you're like, I'm intrigued.
Yep.
And because you've jumped in at that one, because there's that intrigue, you then are introduced to other people and other characters, and then next time you go back into the shop, you start thumbing through the Flash section
Yeah.
to see if there's something that piques your interest there. Um,
I
so
mean, it's an
obviously
addictive medium that
yeah,
way, isn't it? I mean, that's one of the things that crossovers were really designed to do, wasn't it? Was
yeah,
not necessarily the altruistic, let's tell a great story. It was let's introduce people to these other things that we also make that they can also buy from us. And so yeah, there is a large part of that.
so yeah.
One, sorry.
As I said, it's that is, and obviously I know prices now are going up, shall we say. It's a much more expensive hobby than it was many moons ago when we were kids. But you are more tempted, I think, if you have it in your hand, to go, do you know what? Actually, I will take a punt.
Well, that
Whereas,
that pricing thing is interesting to me, because I think in lots of things we do in life, we've seen the price rise over our lifetime, and I think sometimes for us, we see the price of a single issue now. And I mean, I was having a look before the show to kind of get that good gauge on single issues, and depending on the publisher, depending what it is, when a new issue drops, you're probably looking at, for a singular issue, so 22 pages roughly of story and art, you're looking at anywhere between £3.50 and £5.50 for a basic issue. But generally, I tended to see the prices float more around the £4 to £4.50. Now, for me, that is very expensive compared to some of the prices I've seen in my lifetime. I mean, I remember getting them from the newsagents for what was probably 25p, but I do wonder. I'm not sure. I've not really reviewed it against other kind of mediums, but it feels like that is a big spike in price compared to some of the other media we do. However, that might not be a restrictive price point for people coming in now. Like if that's what you're introduced to it as, possibly you just accept it as that. Whereas it's a bit harder for me, because I go, I can't get as much bang for me buck. I mean, strangely enough, the two things that I compare what the comic book price rise feels like, and I'm sure there's people out there who would say petrol, but not being a driver, I don't know. I hear people talk about petrol prices, but it feels like the price rise that I've seen in two of my other big hobbies in life, which is booze and cigarettes. Like they seem to be the only things that have had such a balloon in cost over the time, and that can be very restrictive. As we said, like one of the big boons for comic books in general, but one of the big boons for the physical media and the going into a shop and seeing it is the massive amount of choice you've got, but
Yeah.
actually price can restrict that massive amount of choice, doesn't it? When I say you go in
Yeah.
there to buy A and you end up buying A to Z, probably less likely when A to Z costs you triple figures to get. So you know, but I mean that's probably less the physical side, and that's more the medium in general.
Yeah.
Well, and price of paper and price of everything in the world
Yeah.
has risen, and very quickly. I mean, we will look at this, but while we're talking about pricing, certainly on single issues, I think one of the things that isn't necessarily a pro for digital is if you're trying to collect things day and date, so as they release on the digital mediums, that they keep the price point the same. So you're looking at that sort of £3.50 to £5.50 range to get a digital copy if it's on Wednesday, comic book day, release day. And you know, that's, I can see why as well. As much as I could bemoan that the digital format should be much cheaper, because again, you don't have the distribution, you don't have the paper costs. If that digital service day and date was, let's say, half the price, quarter the price, let's be honest, that's going to destroy a lot of the actual shops, isn't it? Because when we get further down, no matter how we like consuming this stuff, I think if you can consume anything for a quarter of the price, people are going to lean towards that, and that would potentially bring forth the destruction of the physical media. And I think they do need to be really careful when they're looking at this, probably dipping into future stuff, but they need to be really careful to keep that medium going. I was going to say, I had a question to you about the physical media and talking about the shop. And it's one of the things that struck me when I was thinking about this is, and it goes back to something I talked about in my origin story. So when I started, I could get these off of the shelf in the newsagents. The world of the physical comic book has changed dramatically, though, and really now, for getting those physical single issues, you are probably having to go to a comic book specialist, aren't you? Like a specific comic book store, and I think that's something where we talk about the grandness of the choice when you go into one of these stores, but I think that is a restrictive part of physical media that they have these days, is that you need to have one of those stores where you are, or possibly know that they exist, because that might be a barrier to entry on the physical, is people even knowing that there's specialized stores that trade in these.
Yeah, the thing is, you've got to think back, in the 90s, corner shops were a thing, newsagents were a thing.
Yeah, I'm saying newsagents like everyone knows what it is. You know, like they probably don't even refer to things as newsagents anymore, do we?
It's the thing, these days they're now, I know in Norwich alone, all the old newsagents are now pretty much mini supermarkets or things like that. So they will have, you'll get your daily papers in there, but they don't have the magazine selections like they used to.
The comic book spinner racks, the magazines, yeah.
You know, even for, just think back when we were kids, you'd get Match and Shoot and weekly football magazines, and then you'd have your comic book stuff and your music stuff, and they don't they do not have these shops that have these things. So unless you're going into one of the bigger Tesco's or the bigger supermarkets, will you find any sort of magazines normally? Even places like W. Smith's and stuff don't have comics anymore.
No. And as I say, it's a tough one. It's something that I think and again, it's the way that they actually moved to kind of design the industry. You know, they did move away from that direct market, releasing it to shops like that, and moving more to the specialized with the way that they kind of publish and distribute it, which is fine. But I do sometimes think that is. And we talk about like kind of refreshing the audience. We talk about this in a lot of the mediums that are stuff that we're interested in, you know, like the wrestling, the movies, TV, music, and things like that. And I think finding your audience and getting your product into the audience's hand is tricky. And I think it is something that the comic book industry really needs to look at. And as I say, that potentially kind of goes in the negative column for me for physical, is that I think they need a better way of introducing that into people's eyes. I said the wide-eyed youngster that I was the first time I went to a comic shop, it was the most amazing thing ever, and I think that would be impactful for a lot of people, but quantity of them and them being in your local area and you know they exist is going to be a restrictor for me.
Yeah, it's that thing as you said there about like the way they're distributed. If you'd have thought with everything with the MCU, and especially how fucking huge the films
Yep.
were, you would have thought they would have gone into mainstream sellers, and even if it was just with a few select titles, i.e., oh, the Iron Man films are now coming out,
Yep.
Iron Man 2, let's put Iron Man into normal shops and do a start run, or even just sort of do something that can go into these people, because as you said, the films draw fucking stupid money.
And I think like this probably will and should become a kind of topic in saying, because it's something that does fascinate me how they've not managed to turn that audience into the comic book audience, the comic book buying audience. And I mean, maybe the truth is that some mistakes were made when they should have got it at its height. But also, you know, I think we've covered this possibly on the Renaissance Men podcast at one point. Of I think there is a natural barrier to a lot of people to reading and comic books. But yeah, I don't know. I think there really is something there about how we didn't, and I think we would, you know, you would touch on that of going that sort of distribution, but also maybe ultimately what we'll find out is they make so much more money out of the films, the toys, that actually the publication side of it is much less important to the companies now. But my little high horse about it is I hope these companies never forget is that you don't have the movies, the toys, if you don't have those writers writing those stories and you being able to draw from them. And yeah, you can argue that in Hollywood, you know, the people who write the movies, the people who write the TV shows, they are writers as well. But, you know, you look at the product and it is hugely drawn from 60, 70 years worth of publications. And I don't see those movies becoming what they were without that, without the source material behind it. So I do think they need to be very careful not to kill the industry off themselves, which I'm sure they're not trying to do. But I mean, certainly it's stuff I've heard about, like DC is, you know, there's constant rumors that DC will fold up their publication line at a certain point. And I think sometimes, you know, you hear a rumor enough, it's just someone talking bollocks over and over again.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think quite often big companies like that, we talk about how we're the Disney of YouTube. You know, when big conglomerates get involved, so Disney with Marvel and obviously you've got Warner with DC, is that they might see that as just a arm of the business that isn't very profitable, and cut it without thought of the huge consequences onwards. Yeah, God, we meander again. We love a bit of meander on this show. And one of the things I was going to say about the physical bits there, and you know, we just brought up about how one of the restrictions is having a comic book shop in the area. But one of the things that has been hugely noticeable for me in certainly the last decade, and I think this has been really good for physical media and for the comic book industry, is trade paperbacks. So buy trade paperbacks, and we'll do some of the terminology as we go through this, but conceptually what I've always thought of a trade paperback will be your collected edition, but your paperback collected edition, which is normally something like 5 to 6 issues, probably a storyline or a whole series if it's a limited one. They really have started to permeate bookstores. I said earlier about Waterstones. I think that has been a boon for the physical media. Is I go into a Waterstones now and there will be a big section. Now, admittedly, part of that section may include a lot of manga stuff, but I think that is probably a foothold for getting people into the hobby and getting people into the interest. And also price point wise, a more cost effective way of collecting.
Yeah, well, if you think, as I said, in the top fives, obviously with Court of Owls, I bought them as the chunks and the all 12 chunks, I wouldn't have bought them all singly. And the thing is, you scoff at it and go, oh, it's 25 quid. But then if you think that's 6-7 issues at a £5 a pop, it actually does work out cheaper. And obviously you've got the whole thing in one go. So I think with both, either if you get them as single issues or you get the collections, yes, there is a high price point to jump in. But then if you look at the normal price of a book, if you're not getting it from like a supermarket on a special or something like that, you're looking at 15 to 20 quid for a book anyway.
Well, I think with that as well, with some of the paperback ones, I think what some of the nice thing is, and then it's a drug dealer analogy again, which I always like to use, but quite often if it's we'll talk about like The Walking Dead. So The Walking Dead has in the base trade paperbacks where they tend to collect, as I say, 5 to 6 issue storyline. They will generally, like through Amazon or through Waterstones, they'll be around sort of £7. So actually, you're going, that's a much cheaper per unit per issue. But also, I think what you'll find is, again, the drug dealer, they'll do the first volume cheaper. So that kind of entry point for you is you might pick them up for, if you're lucky, and depending on how many issues are in there, you might pick them up for sort of like £4 or £5. So actually, you're paying about £1 an issue, comparatively. But of course, you're getting the real plus for me is, we've talked about this before, you get the whole story, or you get a whole story, maybe not the whole series. And I think there's something in that, but where it loses against the single issues, and this is both in the digital and the physical, is that you are behind. So you will tend to have that whole story play out, and then maybe 3 to 4 months afterwards, you will get the collected edition. So you may be 9 months out of that story starting. Now, we do live in a world of social media taking over everything and spoilers. Now, I think for TV, movies, probably a much bigger thing. You know, if you're watching a TV show and it's one of the big zeitgeist ones, if you don't watch that the instant it comes out and you go anywhere near anything social media, everything that's just happened in that episode is told to you. And excuse me, I don't think that's such a big thing in the comic book world. However, I think that can be somewhat restrictive to collecting, because you don't want that story to be spoiled before you've even seen that story. But certainly it's I know you and I have spoken, it's the way I transitioned into. I like getting the whole story, and I don't mind it being later, and I will just kind of avoid or use my bad memory to forget if I do see a bit of a spoiler. But yeah, I think from a price point, it's a very good way of doing it, and I think it's a very smart way of getting in your eyes. And you know, physical media, I think, has these lovely options for us. And you know, like, it can fit the consumer need. But yeah, I certainly think that's a big win, having that in bookstores. Again, you go there to buy the latest Stephen King novel if that's your bag, and if right next to that is a shelf with some horror comic trades or something like that, could pique your interest, could actually draw your eye into it. Whereas if you're going for one of the digital outlets, we'll stick with Comixology for the point of this, is you're only going there if you're interested in comics.
It's the thing for me, I will always prefer to get the collection ones, because I'm in my late 30s and I put them on a bookshelf and they look good. Whereas, you know, if I have a load of single issues, what am I doing with them all? And where the hell do you store them? Which is something that we will go into in a little bit more on the storage side of it. But that's the thing. If you are an adult doing it, I think that trade versions of stuff, and even some of the hardback stuff, because you can get some
good,
beautiful.
I'm glad you got to that, because that was where I wanted to go next. The hardback collections,
that look like they should. They're like, some of them that look like they should be fucking dining table books or coffee table books, is the proper term, and they look good on a bookcase. They don't look out of place.
Well, behind me on the shelves, and you won't be able to see it because of like sort of distance, but hidden behind lots of pops at the moment are lots of hardback collected editions and some board games as well. Some big board game. We'll do a show on that at some point. But yeah, you are right. There's that kind of that. There's that as an adult purchaser, there is something about that. Yeah, the sexy shelf. I think we talked about it in the recent Renaissance Men one, the old school when we used to have video collections, and it was look at my collection, and I'm not saying look at my collection. It's not like I invite people around every day and go come in here and have a look, but I like to look at it. I like to see physical media there, and that just isn't there in a digital world, is it? You kind of don't get that. Oh, they look really nice. I did actually mean to grab a few because getting onto the hardcover collections, and this is sort of one of the areas where, as you just said, I think physical media, there's no beating it for this. Now, to touch on price quickly, prices for some of the hardcovers can be phenomenal, but I find more often than not is that the prices are phenomenal when they've put some real effort into it. So as you say, like that kind of that coffee table thing. I mean, one of the ones that really strikes out for me, and I'll splicey some pictures in of some of the hardcovers, but the ones that I think kind of always really resonated for me, and the high price point wasn't restrictive, is Dark Horse for things like Hellboy do these ones called the Library Edition, and it collects about sort of 20 plus issues, so it's a chunky bugger, but it's oversized. So actually, it's much bigger than what your initial comics was. So they print it in a bigger size. Yeah. And it comes in this lovely kind of mottled edition. And the other one for me is the DC Absolute editions, which again are oversized. So you get to see this product in a format, again on paper, but they're just lovely. They really do. And it actually changes the reading experience for me when I'm reading them in those formats. So for me, they're worth the money, but I could see if someone, I mean, I remember for a long time, my Amazon wish list was just full of hardback collected editions. And my mother, come Christmas time, would go and have a look, and she'd go, "Oh, bloody hell, not paying that for a bloody comic book." And I'm going, "Well, it's not a singular comic book, but yeah, I mean, it's probably if I was going to pick an absolute preferred way of collecting, it is the hardback collector's edition kind of ones now. But having said that, I'm probably not going to get the hardcover collected edition just on a whim. I kind of have to have experienced that story. So quite often I will transition from either reading a couple of issues digitally through my iPad or getting the trade paperbacks. And if it's a story I really like, I go, okay, that's lovely. Put that to one side now and wait for the beautiful library edition or something like that.
Well, so I've got the hardback 25th anniversary version of Killing Joke.
Yep.
And I also got the hardback special edition of the Batman Catwoman Wedding.
Yep.
The one they called the photo album, which comes in like an old-fashioned photo album book.
Yeah.
And it is
wonderful, isn't it?
And it's the thing, it's like I know with the wedding one, it is a mid-story thing, but I was like, I don't care. I just want that version. And it was a $5 more than the soft cover. And I'm like, for an extra $5, I don't mind paying it.
Yeah. Well, and when we say about like both the trade paperbacks and the hardcover ones, I think it's worth mentioning we are very much kind of lent into the reprints, the collections, but it is the format that will see things like Killing Joke, isn't it? Like the term that I hear a lot now is graphic novel. And I say I hear that a lot now. I always heard that, but I think now even the collected editions are often referred to as a graphic novel. But traditionally, the graphic novel for me was something like Alan Moore writing an original story and it being released in that sort of format. And there's some cracking stuff out there. So again, I think to get people into the medium, releasing things like that, graphic novels in these lovely formats, you are going to be attracted to them on a shelf, aren't you? But again, go to a digital store and probably you're seeing one picture of it and might not be quite so sexy at that point.
Yeah. It's like there's one that I was looking at, but I was like, I can't justify rebuying it. They do a V for Vendetta
Yeah,
oversized,
yeah.
which is 70 quid, and I'm just like, I can't justify the money for it,
Well,
however much I fucking love it.
yeah. And that's the thing. I mean, I've picked up a few like that. So you talk about that sort of £70. The DC Absolute editions, which I imagine the V for Vendetta will come under because it's published by then. And I've got the All Star Superman one. They tend to be £70 to £100, depending on what the size is, and that is a lot of money. And as you say, that is really hard to justify. One of the things that I wanted to kind of pick up on. And this is probably a good time to do it while we talk about the cost of that. And I think this sits nicely in the physical media is cost and price rise. So with those hardcover editions, especially the ultimate editions and the things like the library editions, they will potentially rise in price.
Yeah.
So there are ones, and some of the absolutes, certainly some of the early ones that had maybe a more limited print run. You could have bought them for £75, and now if you wanted to sell them on eBay, or if you looked on eBay, you're looking at sort of £500 you could sell them for, because there's a scarcity to them. You know, like there were only so many, and again, collectors like us want them, and when you can't buy them in a shop anymore, you know, you see the price rise. So the price point for those hardcovers isn't always as restrictive for me, because I feel like they hold their value better and potentially increase. And to dart right back to single issues, we talked about the cost of a single issue, a physical single issue, and we talked about it in relation to it's just come out, but a lot of them will drop in price. So you can buy single issues quite cheaply, again, from comic book stores, from eBay. But by the other token, some of them fly up in price, you know, and they'll fly up in price because maybe there's an introduction of a new character, a significant story element happened. It just piques the interest, and movies coming out. So that's a real advantage that physical media has over digital, because once you've bought that on digital, there's no value beyond what you're going to get out of it. You can't resell your digital copies. It's not like you go, oh, brilliant, I'll buy £100 worth of digital comics from my Comixology, and then a week later go, I didn't like any of them, I will sell them on to someone else. No, there's no resale on digital. Every penny you spend, all you're, and I say all you're getting back sounds very reductive, but all you're getting back is what you consume. Whereas at least with physical media, it will hold some value to someone, and potentially a massively increased value.
And that's the thing. It's like I can't remember. It was a Batman. It was an Arkham Asylum, but not linked to the games. That I bought. It didn't get on with me. And the thing is, I paid 15 quid for it because it's a paperback version, and I sold it to one of my mates for a tenner. So I made a loss on it, but it wasn't a complete.
Well, and you say you made a loss, but you got to experience it, and you only lost a £5, which there's not many things you can do that cost a £5 these days, is there? So
whereas if, as you said, if you'd have bought it digitally, you're down 15 notes on something. You have no interest in.
And you know that as consumers, we know that there's always kind of a gamble element to it. You never necessarily know you're going to enjoy something or get your value for money out of it. But as I say, a real tick in the physical media column for me is that there's more value to it. So as I say, if you buy something you don't like, but also, I mean, we know there's lots of people who just literally kind of collect for the speculation purposes. You know, they'll buy those key issues, as they say. Now, as I say, I think a huge plus for physical media. However, where it is not such a huge plus is we go back to, I want to go and read, or I want a copy of the first appearance of Spider-Man. And if I want that as a single issue, we're not talking about spending a £5.
Are you remortgaging the house?
Yeah. And you know, like as a collector, that's I guess maybe something that is a goal, but also restrictive. Like but maybe not such a problem for physical media, because then you lean into things like collected editions where
there's the reprints of older stuff.
Yeah, so you can read the story and you can experience it. But yeah, I think physical media, there's something in that. There's something nice about going, not only does that look nice on my shelf, but I know that if things went bad, I could flog that and probably get my money back, if not more.
Yeah.
And God, hope things don't go bad. But
the other thing is obviously I've mentioned, like in the earlier ones, obviously I'm dyslexic, so I can physically, to read it, I do physically need to sort of hold it and move my finger off it and things like that, and I struggle with that digitally. It's like, it's bad enough trying to read emails because I have to have dark mode on so I can see it properly. So that sort of tangible having it and is something that you can't recreate anywhere else as well. I mean, that's there is one of the bigger things. It's the dexterity of holding it and flicking through, and like as I've said to you, it's obviously lend you the Daredevil or Deadpool gills. You can't do the same.
Actually, I hadn't thought of that. Yeah, you're right. In a digital world, you can't do lenses, can you?
No, it's like So say you've just read something that's fucking amazing, but you've got it as digital, and you're like, I can take some screenshots.
Yeah, your choice here is to listen to me, understand that it's brilliant, and now you have to go and buy it, you bastard. That sort of thing. Yeah. And when you talk about lens as well, I mean, something that I don't really use, but I imagine it is there. But that kind of kills the concept of the library as well, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Like because there was a period of time where and I think I experienced a kind of lot of the DC trades that way. Some of the DC stories is when I was living in Colchester at the time, and I'd walk past the library on the way to work, and quite often what I do is I just on my way to work, I go in there, I pick up a trade paperback of a story that I'd never read before, and weirdly enough, used to get CDs from there as well. Slightly different reason for the CDs, because at that time I'd come home, burn the CD onto my computer, and have it for life. But which I guess I could have done if I had a scanner at home. But yeah, who's going to sit there every night scanning trade paperbacks in? But yeah, it does kind of kill off that ability to. And I think you'd said it before on the origin story, where you'd walked into like I think school or something like that, and someone's there reading The Killing Joke, and you don't get that, because if someone's just got a screen in front of them, you might ask what they're doing on the screen, but also you probably don't, because you probably just assume they're looking at the internet, or I don't know, they're watching something on Netflix. So it doesn't. They don't advertise themselves as digital, do they? Someone isn't seeing them. Or you're on a train and you see someone. We said about how attractive a cover can be and how it can draw your attention. No one's ever going to do that, because you're just going to see the back of my iPad or whichever device you have. So I think that really is. I wanted to ask a question around the restrictions with digital with things like dyslexia. I mean, I guess it's probably something that we're not necessarily researched, but I mean, I do wonder if there's something they can do with that, though. And, possibly a win for the digital medium of going. It would allow maybe them to. I mean, I know it's nowhere near similar, but I know there's things like around sort of colorblindness, and lots of sort of game companies have put loads of effort into making sure that that's not a restriction for people who are colorblind. And I think the digital medium potentially, if there's the inclination and the time, it is something that they could look at to probably put something in place that would help.
Yeah, I think the problem with comic books is because you can't. It's not as simple as like if you've got a normal story in a book, you can just turn on dark mode.
Yeah,
and it flips black to white.
Yeah,
you can't really do that.
It's the art, isn't it? It's
because it would then do things with the art. So, and they could go down the audio route. That would be something that they could do. So you can still see the pictures, but it, reads it out to you.
That would be odd, though, wouldn't it? It's never kind of crossed my mind, because obviously we'll do some comparative points here to like reading a book, and you know, audio books have somewhat well, very much grown in popularity over time, but I just can't imagine reading a comic that way. I can't imagine the kind of the speech balloons, the thought balloons being spoken to me. I mean, I might try and hunt one down and give it a go, but yeah, it's just conceptually, it just doesn't feel, because you're looking at a picture.
Yeah,
That's one of the huge selling points, isn't it? Is picture and words on that same panel. And yeah, I think getting that delivered to me audio, I think I'd struggle with it.
yeah,
Because
and
what
also,
if I wanted to linger on that panel a bit longer and look at it, and then the
yeah,
audio's gone on 8 panels on, and I'm like, well, I'm still looking at this one.
yeah. So that's the thing. I think that would be where the downfall would be for that. But yeah, as I said, it's not as simple as doing a dark mode. It's not as simple as doing things like that. So it is more restrictive because of the nature of the medium.
Yeah.
For the digital assistants.
Yes.
Which, you know, I think that's where the issue would come in on that, is, as I said, because of the fact that it is more visual. It is more, you're looking, you know, you can sit there and you can sit for 5 minutes just taking in each detail of, as you say, of one panel.
Yeah.
Especially when you get something like when we were doing Nightfall, that break picture.
Yes. Yeah.
I sat and was looking at that for 4 or 5 minutes because I was looking all around and all the bits of it. Whereas if it's an audio, they're probably halfway through the next chapter by that point.
Well, and also, if you just want to read something, you're going to read a book, aren't you? And that's the thing. This medium, like, that's what makes this medium attractive to so many of us, is that combination of art and words, isn't it? So yeah, you're right. I mean, you can have panels that have zero text on it, but you linger on it for a long period of time. And I guess if you were trying to do that in an audio format, you are behooven to the pacing of the person who thought this is the pace you should go through it, not your own. So yeah, I think that would be a real struggle.
And unless they got super techy and did like individual touch boxes for.
But then I feel like it's just I feel like something's gone at that point, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like when you're having to kind of massively over engineer it, and you know, the reliance is on you as the reader to kind of go, right, I'm on this panel now. Now I want me audio. Click that, and maybe click something else to go. Don't move on to the next bit of audio. I feel like I'd then start focusing much more on
what you're doing and not
what I'm doing, rather than what I'm trying to experience.
So yeah, so as I said, I think that's why, obviously, when we go to digital in a bit, is why I definitely say where I am. But yeah, as you said, it's that sort of thing of having them on a shelf and stuff like that.
I mean, that is probably, you know, we talk about like value and things like that, but I think from someone who experienced that and that's how they got into it, you can't beat that for me. You
no.
And I do use digital, and we'll cover that in a minute. But there is just something wonderful about holding your hand, and you know, for those that aren't necessarily big into comic books, who might be watching this to kind of get an idea, are very equatable to a book. You know, we've mentioned it there. There are audio books. There is, I mean, Kindle being probably the biggest format for digitally reading books, and I got a Kindle many years ago, and when this is fantastic, because when I go on holiday, I can have 100 books in my pocket without having to put 100 books in a suitcase, and then so I've got that choice thing. But again, there's something about that experience, about actually holding a book in your hand, and with the comic books, you know, like probably more like that, but also that showing them on a shelf, and there's more to the experience than just consuming, isn't there? And I think that's where we get to with stuff like this, of going, what are all those X factors? But yeah, certainly, I'd say that's the big win for me, is seeing it and holding it. I guess we are still kind of very physical and tactile as a species, and some people, I guess, move on, but I know I said to you before we went on not well on live, not that we're live, but before we started recording about always wanting sort of physical media to perpetuate in lots of formats, and how we consume so much of our media has changed. I'm a big Netflix watcher, but I still buy Blu-rays when I've watched something I really like because I want it on the shelf and I want that physical copy still to see it.
Yeah, it's like I will still go out and buy CDs of the bands that I want their new album as soon as it comes out. Yeah, I'll probably still listen to it mainly through Spotify because it's easier than
See, I went
put the CD in, but I will still go and buy it because usually it's some sort of a lot of bands, and again, this is predominantly more because of what I listen to more than as a general rule. But they will make an effort with the physical versions,
yeah.
whether that be special edition cases, extra shit they chuck in, bonus tracks, things like that. So there is that emphasis on getting the physical version of stuff. So
A couple of years ago, I went back to vinyl, and not because I'm a hipster prick, I promise. But I mean, there were two big reasons for it, and one of them was what you just said. There is the effort. You buy a vinyl, and you get to experience probably the comic book fan in me is screaming out. You get to experience the art that they choose to put on it inside the sleeves, what they put on the record. You'll often get a lot of bonus material, but also, and I guess this may well factor in to what we were saying earlier about experiencing these in a digital media, and can we do it in the same way? Is you said about buying the CD but listening to it on Spotify. I do use Spotify. I do use Amazon Music. Not sponsored by either of them, but chuck us some sponsorship money if you want, big companies. But I find that I turn into a worse consumer sometimes when it is digital. So and albums are a good way of describing it, but it does bleed into the comics. Is I will often skip a song 30 seconds in if I've got it digital, because again I have got thousands and thousands and thousands of songs. So I'll go, yep, I've consumed 30 seconds of that, skip. I've consumed 30 seconds of that, skip. Or if I'm not in the mood for it, and I know it used to drive my missus absolutely mad. She'd go, can we just once listen to a whole fucking song, please? And I'm like, nope, we're skipping. Whereas what part of the move to vinyl is that the record player's on the other side of the room. So I put the record on, I put the needle down, I go back and I sit in my chair. If I start to feel that pangs of skip, I need to get off my ass, walk over there and do it. And I'm much less inclined to do that. And it reminded me about the joy of listening to an album. And I think the same thing with comic books. Now, I'm probably less likely with comic books to maybe skip a page. But I think in that digital medium, it's a lot easier to switch it off and go to something else instead.
Yeah.
And you might lose some of that magic that comes with. So we talk about a collected edition. So if I read a story from like 1 to 6 issues, I find that a much more palatable and enjoyable experience than probably reading issue 1, then a month later reading issue 2.
Yeah.
And when I have a trade paperback, I do it. I'm reading that one I've got, and I read that in its entirety. Whereas, as I say, digital, I can be pulled out. I can go back to that reading one issue mentality, even though I've got the collected edition, and go and read something else instead. And I don't know. I think there are, again, another win for me for physical media. I think you're more likely to consume it in the way that it was intended or created to be consumed.
Yeah. So the one massive downfall for it is obviously space.
Yeah.
If you do buy single issues, when you're a kid, having them in your wardrobe and fill up the thing was fine.
I'm glad I wasn't the only one who filled them up in my wardrobe. Yep.
But the fact
like, Mum, I don't need these clothes. Burn them. I need more room for me comic books.
But it's that thing of like, as we've said, having them on a bookshelf as sort of as a grown up, having like the trade backs and the hardbacks and things like that is Are kids these days going to do what we did when we were kids and buy an issue every month or something and then chuck it in their cupboard and keep it the same way that we did, or are they now in that sort of situation where, because houses are smaller than they were when we were kids, lots of people lived in flats and things like that, the space is limited. Is even that a thing? Because is it that sort of thing where people will buy an issue, keep it for a couple of months until they've got the whole run of a story, read them as a complete, and then bin them out? Whereas the one thing that digital does win at is how fat's your iPad. That's how much space it takes up.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, and we said a choice again. Like, it's interesting getting onto kind of what people will do going forward, because when we started collecting, we didn't have any option. It was you bought single issues or now. So that kind of got us into that mindset of being like that. Whereas someone who's, let's say, like 13, 14 now, and probably most of the stuff that they have in the world that can be delivered digitally is delivered digitally, isn't it? Like they get
probably that.
Yeah, they get their movies, their TVs from it. I mean, even going into things like video games. So, our choice was you went and bought a video game and you had to physically plug that into a console, regardless of what what format it was in. Whereas they're consuming that probably digitally now. They've probably got Xbox Game Pass, so they don't have disc-based copies in the house. They're not getting their music that way. They're not getting their video games that way. They're not getting their films that way. Their TV that way. And actually, does it even cross their mind to want to physically get a comic book in? Like, are they just naturally drawn to the digital because so much of their world and so much of their life is in the iPad now, or in whichever other brand you use? PS, Apple sponsor us. I'm all about sponsorship tonight. But yeah, I don't know. I think that's like sort of cracking forward in time. I think that's a really interesting part of the digital versus physical argument. Is I think the companies probably need to be relatively careful with this, because I could see physical dying, and I don't think it should. And when I say I can see physical dying, I just said I buy vinyl again. Vinyl's restrictively expensive these days. So if I want to buy a new album, I'm normally having to spend 3 times the amount to get the vinyl. And I don't want to see comic books go that way. I don't want to see at some point in time me having to spend. I can get a digital copy for £5, but having to spend £15 for the equivalent as a physical. And when it becomes that niche, I think it's really hard to justify actually having publishing arms at that point, isn't it? It's very expensive to actually print and publish.
Though, do you think if they was this sort of dystopian future that you're talking of, would that
Love a
be
dystopian
where
future.
maybe trades and hardbacks are the only
Could be
physical? So your weekly runs are only digital.
Yep. And then you go to the bookshop and you pick up a nice collected edition, or as we said, in a hardcover, you pick up the deluxe version so that you can have something in your house that reflects it.
Because putting it to a music thing, it's like Metallica have just reissued the Black Album for the 30th anniversary, so you can pay a tenner for the remastered version. You can pay 40 quid for the remastered CD with extra couple of discs, or you can pay 300 quid to get it all on weighted vinyl and with all the bells and whistles. Will that be where we'll be looking at things of, like, if you just want it as digital, that's fine, you've got a digital only.
Yeah.
But then there being, say, maybe 2 price points of physical, but you will pay more.
I mean, you do see that a lot in music now, don't you? Like, bands will actually do their own pressing, won't they? They'll go and press kind of a limited run of vinyl and put all this stuff in it. I wonder how that works for comic books, because the creators, and I know obviously, like the music-wise, bands would be signed to record companies, and there's part like this. But the comic book world has, and I will get onto something about this in a minute, actually, in the digital side, but it's much more tied to the company, isn't it? So Alan Moore, when he wrote Watchmen and when he wrote V for Vendetta, and he did that for that company. Now, I know that caused a lot of controversy because there's a lot about creators' rights and what that company can do with it. But let's be honest, the only person who is choosing to do a very deluxe edition of V for Vendetta or Watchmen is DC Publishing. Alan Moore cannot go out and do that. Whereas I think with the band stuff, there's a lot more remit in the band being able to go, yeah, we want to do a special run here. So I think that those publishing arm companies need to perpetuate and need to perpetuate with a physical media for, I think, them to have any desire to do this anymore. But yes, I could see a world where we move less to single issues in anything outside of digital, and then relying on publishing collected editions, which for me would be heartbreaking because I grew up on single issues, and I still think it's I'd have to put some thought into do I advocate the mass deforestation just so I can read Superman? I'm not sure, but I think it's I think the quantities it would ever sell, I don't think that's going to be the thing that destroys enough trees that is going to cause such an environmental issue. So I do want physical media to continue. I do think, like in so many other mediums, though, it's going to be a tough ride, and I think it's going to continue to be a tough ride for quite a few years before it settles down. So with music, we're probably kind of settling now, aren't we? You know, like that kind of blow up of iTunes. I think the music industry
and all that back in 2000.
I think music is kind of finding its feet now, whatever that may end up being. I think movies and TV with the streaming services, I think that they're a step ahead. I think, again, they're closer to finding their balance. Take out a global pandemic, cinema wasn't doing that badly. But of course that's impacted it. Whereas I think comic books are in a bit more peril at the moment. I think I worry more about this than I do any of those other mediums for the future of physical.
So let's now jump over the fence.
Well, that's the thing I was saying about I worry about the physical, and now I'm going to like extol the virtues and some of the downsides of digital. And yeah, you know, it is the flip side of the coin. So I think any to kind of weight it, any positives I do say here, I do want us to not forget what we were just talking about is how important physical media is, because there are some real pluses to the digital. And I guess the big elephant in the room, you talked about size and spacing, but there is the quantity, the sheer quantity of media that you can contain in digital. You know, your only limitation is the size of your hard drive. Step back on that. Probably the other limitation is how much money you want to spend on it. But technically, your only limitation is the size of it. And even that, they're cloud-based. So you don't actually need to store everything on your device of choice. Yeah. And I'll go predominantly first about Comixology, because Comixology, I think, is where the bulk of people will consume their digital comic books. So it was a company that were very kind of forward thinking and went, oh, you know, like I've seen some of what's going on in the world. Let's release comics digitally, and got like the publishers to sign up and agree that the stuff could go through it. Now it's an arm of Amazon. Amazon come along and saw this and just went, "Yep, thank you very much. We'll buy that." So and a lot of it's kind of optimized for Amazon Fire and Amazon Kindle because of that. But yeah, they are an Amazon-based company. But there is, I talked earlier about day and date. So on a Wednesday, when comic book stores get their new comic book releases, Comixology gets its new releases. So you talk about like kind of how will you see it. So you go, if you're a Comixology user, you go onto the site, and on a Wednesday, you click the button, and it has the cover for every comic that is published that day that you can buy by it. So you can do the scroll down, and you can get that seeing the cover and going, oh, what is this? Yeah. I think it's less impactful, if I'm honest, because seeing it on a shelf, you know, we keep saying seeing things on a shelf, I think have an attractiveness to it. Where digital has a bit of a bonus for it though is that there's something weird in digital, and I find this in a lot of the way I consume things of going. I'm more likely, weirdly enough, just to go, I'll get it. Because I'm not having to maybe store it, or I'm not having to walk it back into the house and explain why I spent loads of money on something. It's kind of it. Sometimes I find sometimes when you're buying something digitally, you almost forget that you're buying it because there's no money transaction. You're not tapping a card. You're not giving someone the cash. You're just clicking a button because they've already got your payment details, and it just magically disappears from your bank account, and you don't know anything about it until you have to buy food at the end of the month, and you go, "Where did all that money go?"
But you know that role too.
Yeah. But I mean, but they're all there, and I think, as I say, is a delivery system. So when I go into and go back to what I was saying earlier, I have to go into a comic book store, and I do have one locally to where I am. And I go in there, and generally on a Wednesday, they have like a big spinner rack in the middle, and it will have everything that's released that day, and I can have a look. Whereas in that digital world, I just click a button, and it shows me everything that is released on that day. Price point wise, it's not as good value, I would argue, because it has no value than the value of reading it once you've bought it. And they do price it the same for day and date release, and as I say, I think they have to, otherwise physical really is in trouble. But you kind of lose that. I go and buy the first appearance of a new character on a digital comic tomorrow. That's worth nothing other than me reading it. Whereas you go and buy that as a physical copy in a shop, and who knows, in a year's time, that's £100 that's worth, and you might not want to sell it, but at least you know it has something. Or at worst, it's worth 10p, but it's still worth 10p, and I have none of that with the digital now. As I say, storage, being able to, I go on holiday, I take my iPad. I have got every comic I've ever bought digitally either stored on the hard drive or in the cloud, and I can recall it. So if I want to read anything, it is there for me. Whereas if I want to recreate that experience on holiday, I'd have to get a lorry. Yeah. You know, and there is something in that. There is something in that, having everything there to fit your mood. But as I said about the records, part of the problem with that sometimes though is not being able to settle on anything. Possibly the over choice at that stage. But I mean, it is huge. I mean, I don't know how many I've got on my iPad, but I would say thousands of equivalency of single issues, let's say. I don't have to house thousands of those issues in my house would have cost me a lot more. And my missus just about bearing the amount of pops in here. She's probably not gonna that, and my mum's loft can't take any more either. So digital really does have a huge selling point for it in that regard.
See, obviously I haven't really looked into it because I said it's I've done the bits where you get your freebies for Batman Day and your freebies for Comic Book Day and stuff, and tried them. But do they have old shit? So can you go and get Action Comics 1?
Well, and that was one. I'm glad you mentioned it, because that was one of the bits I was going to come to next. We talk about the value proposition and the price. So when I say that when you've bought it, there's no resale, but yes, you can go and get Action Comics 1, and you can probably get it for a couple of quid. Whereas I can't do that. So if I'm there purely to read it and experience it, I can, and I can do that at very cost effective. And this is where, I said day and date, the price is the same. I think this is where digital has such an advantage, is that you go a year down the line, you're getting those equivalent stories very, very cheaply. I mean, Comixology itself has pretty much a sale every day of the week. So like Monday might be a DC sale, Tuesday, I say pretty much every day of the week. They tend to not have sales on Wednesday because it's New Comic Book Day, but you'll get an Image Comics one Tuesday, a Marvel one Thursday. And we said earlier about like the cost of a trade paperback. So a collected 6-issue run of probably being anything from like £7 up to kind of £20. most of these they go in the sale, you're getting them for like £2.50. So you're getting sort of 6-7 issues worth of story for that. And that is really good value for money. And you said about freebies, that they offer a lot of free stuff. And again, drug dealer mentality. They'll give you a trade. They'll give you Walking Dead for free. You can get that on your Kindle for free. But their hope is that you come back and you buy 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And that's another way where it really comes into its own. Is it can be. This is not a cheap hobby to be in. I think we've said this earlier, and I think because there's so much created and so much that's interlinked, that if you do want to read lots, digital has a massive advantage for it on that side. And Comixology, as I say, is the primary one for purchasing single issues, but there are subscription services as well. So Marvel have Marvel Unlimited. So this is probably a lot more like your Netflix model, but specifically for Marvel. But in fact, I'm just going to click this button because I'm going to check, because I don't want to misquote their price, but I think it's $9.99. Yeah, $9.99 a month. And for your $9.99 a month, you get access to I think at the moment it's 29,000 issues. And these will be issues from the historic past. So you're probably going back to like Spider-Man's first appearance to relatively soon. So yeah, you're stepping straight into that Netflix model of going, I've got access to all of these. You don't own any of them. It is, again, the Netflix model of you're paying to be able to view it. Now, once you've viewed it, you can always view it. So if they took it off of the service, you'd still have access to it to it later. But where Marvel Unlimited probably doesn't fit a lot of consumers is you don't get day and date. So they are always a couple of months behind on releases, but strategically, I guess, because it's their own product and they don't.
Then you go and buy them.
When they come out. And I imagine, like, you buy them when they come out, or Amazon probably pay them fat cash to not release them on their digital service day and date. And probably this crosses both Marvel Unlimited and Comixology, but probably more Marvel Unlimited is everything isn't available. So if I'm collecting a series and I order it from a physical store, or I go in every Wednesday, I know I will get every issue unless there's a calamity, and I guess every issue gets burnt. Whereas not necessarily would everything be released on digital. So my Marvel Unlimited, I know, will have like a long run of, let's say, Daredevil. But if it's a story that wasn't particularly well received at the time or not interesting, it won't be there. So you might then suddenly skip from issue 250 to the next one on there's 274 or something like that. Yeah. And they have to, I joked earlier about physically scanning them in. They have to physically scan all of those in to get them onto their service. So they I mean, it's one of the things they said with Unlimited is that over time their dream is to have every Marvel issue ever produced on there. Yeah. But it will take time because they have to employ poor bastards who have to sit there scanning over and over again. Yeah. So, and again, you have that model out there. So there are different models, and I guess it's what floats your boat. Now, if you're an Image Comics fan or a DC Comics fan, you're unlikely probably to go to the Marvel subscription service because you are only going to get Marvel. I believe DC have a live one in America, but it's only in America at the moment. But I think, again, that they're doing an equivalent service, I believe, and I think they're also planning on maybe releasing some kind of the TV stuff to it as well. So if you subscribe, you get some of their shows as well. On the Marvel Unlimited and the Comixology, you do also sometimes get digital exclusives. So it is stuff that won't be released in physical media. No offense to any of it, but when I've read or looked at any of the digital exclusives, I tend to find they tend to be of a lesser quality than if I was getting a physical media exclusive. It does often seem to be a story they had in the cupboard that they weren't really planning on releasing, so they'll go, let's have an exclusive, and they tend to churn that. So I don't think that's a particular selling point for it.
See, the idea of being able to get anything from any time with ease
Yeah.
is obviously a massive up point for digital. And also, as you say, when they do, because as I said, I signed up for it when they were doing the Batman Day thing, and I got the free Batman one, and they were like, this for 25p, this for 25p, this for 25p.
Yeah.
And, you know, if you're a kid, the amount that you can get for your money is going back to like it was back when we were kids.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I can see how it can get your claws in and get stuff. And as you say, if you've got an iPad or Kindle or whatever, how small that is, and you can have so much on there. But as I said, the issue is it is restrictive for people that have any sort of issues with reading stuff.
Yeah.
And as we said earlier, it's that sort of how difficult would it be to do dark mode or the audio stuff. For the medium that it is, I think that it's too restrictive for your standard fixes.
One of the things that's only just occurred to me with something you said there, though, and I feel really stupid now. It's only just occurred to me, but I keep sort of saying like, and presumably anyone who's watching this probably has a tablet and things like that. And I think we are so used to people having technology now. But one of the things I said was like the value is so much cheaper. But I guess what I didn't factor in is, do you have to buy a fucking iPad though?
Yeah.
You know, like there's that, and again, I think we've got so used to them being so common, or like phone or whatever. But that's kind of, I guess, not a given. Is that actually, there is that barrier to entry as well, isn't it? It's the cost of the technology that the platform runs on. And
yeah, I suppose I get it with work. I'm not going to go into what I do, but I do deal with a lot of older generation people. That when we say it's cheaper if you do it online, I don't use the internet. I don't have the internet. I don't have a mobile phone. That there are people that think, oh, it's just an older generation thing, but they look at fucking the state of the world we are at the moment.
Yeah,
people struggling with money.
Yeah,
we all think, oh yeah, everyone's got smartphones, everyone's got this, that, and the rest of it. There is a load of people out there that don't have this shit and don't have access to it, where, as you say, they go to the libraries or things like that to get to read anything.
And as a parent, which I am not, but I imagine like when my mum took me up the newsagents and I went, oh, can I have that? Like, regardless of like how much 20p was like, out of her day back then or whatever, she'd probably go, yeah, that's good, because that will keep him quiet for the whole day.
Yeah.
Worth the 20p for that alone. Whereas, if you strip that physical media out of it, like as a parent looking at having the cost of bringing up a kid, you're going, oh Jesus, like the only things my kids are now going to ask for are expensive iPads, phones, and things like that, because that's the only way that they get the things they like delivered to them. So I guess as a counterpoint, a massive win for physical for me is it removes that restriction of having to have a device. But probably a sad indictment of the world we live in is it didn't even cross my mind until just then of going, well, yeah, of course, like it's fine because everyone's got this. And yes, probably the truth of it is that most people do, but it does drive that very, very top end IT market, doesn't it? Like I imagine Apple and like Samsung and people like that, they're not dumb. They've got into this game, but they're loving it because every move that is a move towards digital is a move to them being able to just kind of go, well, we're selling more units because people can't live without this anymore because there's no way. I said about the instant access. So if you have a large hard drive equivalent or like an SSD card or whatever, you can hold a load of it on there. But also, if you've bought it, it is always available for you to download. So again, getting back to probably a negative is if you don't have a large hard drive, you need the internet. And, I talk about being on holiday. Well, holiday in the middle of nowhere, or you're on a plane and you're not getting Wi-Fi and things like that. So yeah, there are hidden extra costs to it that the physical media doesn't have. The physical media, you buy it, you've got it, haven't you?
Yeah.
So yeah, boo digital. No, I'm not joking. And one of the things that I just wanted to pick up on digital, because as I say, I think the big selling point for digital is space, cost. And I think if you have space restriction and you want to do this on a much tighter budget and ease probably, I think all of those are big wins for digital, but certainly there are dark sides to it. Now, one of the things that's recently really started to sort of take hold in the digital world is creator owned comic books being released digitally only, and that the medium that a lot of people seem to be going to is this thing called Substack, which I think originally it was designed for to allow people platforms to release things like newsletters and potentially smaller novels and things like that. And it seems to have really piqued a lot of the comic book creators' interest. And one of the big ones, which I think is going to be a bit of a yardstick for us over the next couple of years, is they call themselves the Tiny Onion Studios, but it's got I think it's like James Tynion and Scott Snyder and Tom King. So all people that have been very involved in the Batman universe in recent time. And we've seen similar things with, it's one of the reasons why Image Comics rose up from nowhere. But that is creators wanting to create and release their own material, not be controlled by a comic book company like Marvel and DC, and lose a lot of their creator rights. So when they create a character for them, the company owns it. And Image and to a degree some of the other companies like Boom and Dark Horse have been really good at allowing creators to own their own characters that they produce through there. But there's still that restriction of having to convince someone that you're going to sell enough copies that it's worth them doing a print run. So this is and again, there's a few kind of notable ones coming and on their way, which this is allowing creators to, their cost now is the time it takes to write them, the time it takes to draw them, and probably a bit of a costing around the hosting of it there. And I'm really interested to see where this goes, because some of the creators involved in this are people that I want to read their stuff of.
When you said Snyder, I was like, my ears pricked up there. I was like, yes.
But the hard part of it is I'm almost, and when I say like release digital only, I think the concept that they're going with is that it'll be released digitally exclusively for a period of time, and if it sells well enough, then they'll do a print run. So again, I think it's a nice thing for them. I think it allows them to be creative in a medium where they'd have to give up some of their rights to necessarily tell these stories elsewhere. I do worry about it though, because it's a very thin line doing something like this, isn't it? Because what if these do sell really well and they realise that actually they can make a bloody fortune doing this, and everyone goes that route? Does it kind of bring on the death of print media then? Because even a successful one, something you said earlier, and maybe this is the model we end up with, is that creators go and create their own stuff, they release it digitally, the story goes out there, and then they do a collected edition. So actually we start consuming them in trade paperbacks, hardbacks and things like that. But it is something that is really kind of currently, right at this moment, something that's finding its feet. And I have seen a lot of comic book creators kind of come out since this. And I say about this Tiny Onion, it was actually Jeff Lemire, who is one of my favorite comic book creators. I think was the first notable creator to use Substack. And I think he was kind of extolling its virtues, probably the same as if we were going down the pub with people we work with, and you'd found something really good, like when you're down the pub having a beer, you go, "Oh, this is really good. Why didn't you get this?" I think there's probably an equivalency in the comic book creator world. So I do think it's something for us to keep our eyes on, because as you say, I think digital medium has its restrictions, and that would be a real shame for me, is that if people lose sight that actually not everyone can consume it digitally, so then you're actually making the market smaller and I say exclusive, but you are excluding people, and you're
Yeah,
excluding people who, and you know, go back to what you said about dyslexia. And again, probably, as much as I don't know, probably something around sort of some visually impaired impairments, like and color blindness, but also people who can't afford the tech.
yeah,
You know, like, and it's a shame because I've always thought of the comic book medium as something that should be inclusive. You know, it should be that, come on, everyone, we all love this stuff, don't we? But yeah, so yeah, an interesting string to the digital world that I think is on its way and may become prevalent very soon.
yeah. It's similar to, if we throw it back to sort of music, so similar to like Bandcamp and that sort of thing of where you can self-release digitally. But the thing with Bandcamp, with bands and stuff, a lot of the time they will then do vinyl releases, or they there is always physical ways to own stuff.
Yeah, and I think I that's certainly the intent of the ones that I've heard, but
Yeah,
um
it's
but
too
as we said, it's a very expensive way, isn't it? So like if you're a band and you want to do a vinyl pressing, I'm not saying that that's cheap, but I think like once you've done all the effort to record it, and probably finding a company that will do a vinyl pressing for you is probably less restrictive than if you're a comic book creator going, I want to get this printed onto paper, bound, and then released into distributed into shops. So yeah, I do wonder whether this is going to become problematic, and it would be a shame if it was some of the creators that I love that because it'd be problematic, but also they do need to earn their money, and I think
yeah
for 50 years, like comic book creators have not really, you know, Marvel are well at the moment, obviously Marvel are a huge part of Disney, but there ain't many of the creators that wrote those stories along the way that saw any of that Disney money. You know, that was
no
all your kind of your corporate entities that own it, and it's a tough balance, isn't it, of allowing creators to be creative, which I think the digital medium probably assists in that, because the physical medium has that restrictive point for the creators.
yeah. I think it is, as you say, it's one of those of, if it can make a change positively
Yeah,
that, you know, gives people more of a cut of what they do, because you think, yeah, Stan Lee did well out of Marvel,
yeah,
but a lot of people that he was working with, or the people that who
yeah.
employed him, he didn't do fuck all out of it. You know,
Yeah, we
and
said earlier about the Marvel movies, you know, like you see kind of if you, well, I was gonna say if you stay through the end credits, but one of their design features is keeping you in the end credits because they'll put a cut scene at the end, but there'll be like a lovely kind of little note on there saying, I mean, I imagine, and I've not actually bothered to look, but I imagine there'll be something in a lot of the tail end of the Marvel ones, especially like the Avengers ones, of maybe saying thanks to Jim Starlin. But
yeah,
you know, he probably didn't earn much coin out of all of the stuff he did with Thanos and the story that he wrote. It probably didn't. I mean, but I say that, I guess where he might have earned a little bit more is it might have shipped a few more of the collected editions. But even that, I doubt they make a lot of money per unit. I doubt
no,
it's made him rich. Whereas, yes, it has made some shareholders very, very rich along the way, and getting the getting them. I'm not doing this to have like a total pop at all companies, because I do realize, like, I mean, Marvel, like, well, may even cover this at some point. I mean, Marvel pretty much went bankrupt at one point, and
a couple of
the people,
times.
yeah, and the people who kind of invested a lot of money and created this company and all of the and employed all the people that do, as we say, the things like the actual printing and stuff like that, is such a big beast, and you know they have kept multiple people employed. So here I am playing the violin for the creators. I think there is more to it than that. They're not necessarily evil, although of course they are now that they're part of Disney.
Owned by
Please,
the fucking mouse.
yeah, like please sponsor us, the mouse. But yeah, there is more to it. But I do. I think I always lean to, I want the creative people to earn. out of this. I really want it to be viable for them, because I think then they create more. And
Yeah.
let's be honest, we wouldn't be talking about it if it wasn't for the creators. I mean, if someone had just, let's say 70 years ago, Stan Lee and Kirby and Ditko, when they were there, if they just drew a picture of Spider-Man, released that, people might have bought that and gone, oh, what a good poster. That looks like a cool character.
Yeah.
If there was no stories to go behind it and there weren't further pictures and sequential art with it, who'd fucking care? You know,
Yeah.
that kind of that push. And I say, I know we're kind of meandering a little bit away from the digital and physical, but I think it has to work. That's the balance, isn't it? It has to work for the consumer, which is us, and it has to work for the creator. And I see some real advantages in digital to the creator, but I think for every advantage there is to the creator, I think it's probably a disadvantage often to the industry as a whole, and the way that we consume it.
Yeah. So, as we've sort of basically said, there is no winner here.
No. I think wherever possible, I think, you know, if I was going to recommend anything, I would say that if you can, use both. I think you know, we've said there are pluses and minuses to both of them. So if you have the option of both, I think maybe lean into the good points, as we've said. So if you're looking for maybe reading some of the real classic stories that you just wouldn't be able to afford if you tried to buy them in singular issues now, consider going digital. Read that. But also, like, if you want maybe that fuller experience, stay physical. And
or you know, as I said, if you take a bite of, say, digital, and you have like one or two issues or something and you like it, get it nice to have it on your shelf. You know,
and you know, like I said, I mean, not that I'm shilling for Marvel Unlimited, because I am actually surprised that there are not more models like this, the subscription model. But something like that, I mean, $9.99 for a month, and I imagine they do like a kind of probably if you sign up for 1 month, you get a month for free or something like that. You know, that's a good. We said about going into a shop and looking at the issues on the shelf. This is kind of your chance to do that in a digital format, isn't it? You know, like go and have a little look around and go, what have they got? And if there's something that tickles your fancy or you're particularly interested in, maybe read a couple and then consider going to the physical copies. Get the trade paperback, get the hardcover.
Well, it's the thing is, like, I will say from the films, because I had never heard of them, Guardians.
Yeah.
But after the first film, I went and bought the Ultimate Collection. Like, it's a selection of like stories through the Guardian timeline and the Pantheon and stuff. And I was like, I'd have never picked that up if it wasn't for the film.
Yeah.
So, you know, with a digital model, as you say, if you watched Guardians or you've watched Thor, or, you know, even any of the TV stuff, or even the What Ifs,
you
know, you can go and find that source material and you're not paying out for it. You put your tenner down for your month.
Yeah.
If you don't like it. You know.
Whereas, as you said earlier, like if you did that sort of a physical, you went onto Amazon and went, I've heard of Guardians because of that. Or no, let's use the What If example, actually, because I think it's a really good one. And you go, I kind of like What If. What is there that's What If like? And you could buy probably a collected edition of the comic book What If, and it is nothing like the TV show.
Yeah.
But you spent your tenner then. Like it's
I looked at Zombies before What If went live, and before What If started showing, you could get it for £20.
Yeah.
As it's now £40 because obviously the show's been on, demand's gone up, price has gone up.
Yeah.
You know, and that's the thing. It's like I would not drop that sort of money on it, but if I had unlimited, would I read them? Yeah, I'd give them a go. And the thing is, if I then liked it, again, I wouldn't pay 40 notes for it, but I'd keep it in the wish list and wait till it dropped down to reasonable price again and put my hand in my pocket.
one last thing I wanted to quickly pick on that. Sorry, I meant to say it earlier, and I mean, again, indicative of the time and the world we live in. But you know, here we are, kind of advocating, going, look, this is probably a lovely little price entry point for you to be able to try a load of stuff and find what you like. I want to put another little negative in the digital column, which might also be considered a positive, but you can be spoilt for choice. So that same thing that I know I experience, and I know that people do, is when you're presented with 100,000 things, it can be very hard to go, which one of these do I want? Now, on the flip side of that argument is you're presented with 100,000 things, so what a wonderful choice. But it's both a positive and a negative. You've got so much choice, but that amount of choice can be stifling. But yeah, certainly worth a look at. And again, if you can use digital medium, I would suggest to people, like, look on Amazon and look on Comixology, because as you said earlier, quite often there's things that are really, really cheap or even free. And again, I would always advocate. I mean, the digital media do it once a year, don't they? They have free comic book day where you can go into a comic book shop and pick up some free samplers. Use those samplers, because one, if you're not sure about whether it's a medium for you, you'll find out relatively quickly by looking at free stuff. But also, even if it's something you're into, you might pick up something by a writer or an artist or a character you've never considered before, and yeah, all of a sudden they become an obsession. You've got 8,000 shelves behind you with hardcovers, you know, that sort of thing. But that's what we're in this for, isn't it? Is to experience, to find the best way for us to experience stories that move us, mean something to us, and engage us. You know, we're trying to get through this life without it being all consumed by work and all the shitty stuff. And we're trying to fill our life with things that we enjoy, make us grow, make us think about the world in a different way, and find the way that it works for you. And also, I mean, we say about like shows like this, and you know, like, for anyone watching, we really or listening, we really appreciate it. But we'll help. You know, like if anyone's ever got any questions, like we'll point. We won't necessarily have the right answer. Like, you know, it's a lot of this will be opinion based, but we'll certainly kind of go, well, we tried this, we like this, we didn't try this. Give that a go. So yeah, I think ultimately in a versus, what we've really come down to is there's tons of benefit for both, isn't there? And actually a mixture of the two is probably a very, very good way to consume. But I do want to say, if I was going to have a conclusion to the verses, I would pick physical, because for all the advantages that digital have, digital is the one that worries me the most, because I think digital potentially leads to the downfall of it be as a medium more than physical does. And evidence has taught us that video games didn't die, music didn't die, film didn't die, TV didn't die, despite protestations that it potentially would. But I think that digital can be a killer for an industry, and because comic books have such a smaller customer base already, I do think that digital could kill physical in it easier than in any other medium, and I do worry about that.
And also split the customer base smaller.
Yeah. I mean, we said earlier about the comic book stores and it being a potential negative if you've got one in your area. Well, you're going to have less in your area if it's not a viable business. You know, like if 70% of their customers turn digital, it's going to be really hard justifying keeping the lights on for a comic book store, isn't it?
So with that, we are done for this week.
We are.
And as we said,
we're coming in under 8 hours, Chris. It's good.
I know. So as I said, obviously, if you've got any thoughts, comments, or anything to add, chuck it in the comments below. Hit us up on the Book of Face and the Twitter and all the other social outlets that you can find. As always, like, subscribe, ring bells. If you are listening via a audio device, comments, ratings, reviews on.
It's reviews, isn't it?
iPods.
I'm sure ratings and reviews are how it goes on audio.
Yeah,
I should know this because I listen to a
5
lot of
stars.
audio. Yeah, 5 stars.
5
yeah.
stars.
Yeah, just like the great band, we want to be 5 stars.
Yes, and as I said earlier, multitudes of content on this channel. You've got the gaming stuff with Stu and Seddon's cult, pop videos.
Join the cult. Join the cult.
And obviously, the granddaddy of them all, the spectacle of the spectacles, the greatest show in known humanity. The Friday night main event that is
the show that the BBC's one show fears every Friday night as we go live against it.
So, thank you, Mr. Seddon, for another wonderful episode.
Thanks
and
for having me.
Next time, where we discuss what makes heroes. We'll see you next week.
Thanks for watching, and just remember, you can join the Cult of Egg by liking and subscribing to this YouTube channel. We release regular content where we talk about all things geek, all things pop culture, and all things that we're interested in. You can also come along and join the discussion on Facebook groups and Renaissance Cast. And you can join us on our Twitch channel where Stu regularly streams games. And if you'd like to support us, then please follow the link for the Patreon. Thanks very much.